welcome, and a big welcome to Abbey Branch, who brought their band. Great band, you got there too, okay. I want to say thank you to Rob for hosting tonight's event, but particularly to Alex Latham in his office and all his team in his office who put obviously a huge amount of effort into getting 500 people here tonight. This man can organise 500 people, surely you can organise it.
Nice to see you.
Because these events don't just happen by accident, and I want to thank those that have supported the event tonight with sponsorship and support, and Rob has named all of those groups, and thank you very much for your help and support. Also, I think we should just reflect for a moment the sadness at the loss of Darren Cooper so suddenly. I put out a statement on social media straight after he died. He is one of those people that has the lifeblood of the Labour movement, totally heart and soul within their community and within their wish to make their local authority work for the people of that district. So can we just have a round of applause? It's very nice to see my old friend Ken Purchase here. Wave, Ken. And he's deeply insulted and has refused to speak to me for another 10 minutes. But I want to thank Ken for being a great friend when he was in Parliament, but also, I'll come back to this in a moment, the fantastic work that he does in the Socialist Education Association on bringing socialist values to the education system and challenging the marketisation of education. Ken, thank you for that. Nina Gill here tonight. We've worked very well together in the European group, the MEPs group in Brussels, and also all the issues around the state of Europe that we all want to achieve. We are campaigning for a Remain vote, but it's a Remain vote to realise a Europe of social justice for all, not a free market Europe where big business takes over. We're on about we're on about Working Time Directive, we're on about anti-discrimination legislation, we're on about environmental protection, all those kind of issues you can only achieve if you do it together. Let me explain how. Do you know something? The Home Office are totally incompetent beyond belief. If polluted water comes from the continent and reaches our shores, they fail to stop it at the international border. And if polluted air blows from Britain across to Europe when there's a west wind, as there often is, it has no respect whatsoever for national borders. How shocking is that? The only way you deal with environmental protection, workers' protection, dealing with very big, often semi-out of control companies is through international agreement. But, and this is the big but, we've got to stand up to protect the principle of public investment, stand up to the principle of public ownership of our railway system, which I'm very keen to achieve, and stand up for the principles that there will not be investor protection through the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which I'm very strongly opposed to. I want to say thanks to Rob Maris for being not just a great friend in Parliament, but also a very, very important member of our Treasury team. And he's about to knuckle down to deal with the issues of the finance bill and all the gruesome and ghastly details of the budget that the government has just put down. Rob, thanks for all you do. Thanks for the whistle that just appeared now. And it's something to do with Treasury. It's obviously your fault. And thanks for being such a great colleague in Parliament. As some of you know, I grew up less than 20 miles away from here in Newport, Shropshire. Anybody here from Newport? Wow, really? Welcome. There's still no bus service, is there? But thanks for being here, and also meeting so many other people from Telford, from Shrewsbury, from Stoke-on-Trent, and from all over the West Midlands that have come here this evening. And as one who actually, as a child, used to be taken to Wolves matches, it was sometimes a nice experience, sometimes it was an absolutely brilliant experience, sometimes it was less exciting, and I think this afternoon's 0-0 draw has to go into the category of less than exciting. But I do wish the Wolves well, and I still have somewhere the black and old gold hat that I wore when I went to the matches. So we have great opportunities ahead of us. We've got council elections taking place all over the region, we have the European referendum coming up, and we have the Police and Crime Commissioner elections coming up. And I want to say thank you to David Jameson for all the work that he's done as Police and Crime Commissioner. And very interesting discussions with David about how we can use the position of Police and Crime Commissioner to try to ensure that those with mental health conditions are not held in police cells. That we do have approach we can have to young offenders, indeed to all offenders, but that also, since the government has now ordained that the fire service will also become part of the responsibility of the Police and Crime Commissioner, we renew our campaign to have flood protection and flood prevention as a statutory duty for the fire service, because basically they've saved an awful lot of property and an awful lot of people's lives over the last 3 years of serious floods in this country. They should be funded to do it properly. Yeah. But in the local elections, we all know the issues we're facing. We're facing the issues of a housing crisis in this country, an adult social care crisis in this country, and a crisis in the provision of all levels of public service. Why? Because of the huge cuts that have been made in local government budgets by central government, and they continue to be made. Because of the utter unfairness of the way this is done, you could draw a map of Britain, and you put within that areas of high deprivation and high poverty. You could put those in red, and you would see them all over the country. You would see parts of inner London, you would see Birmingham, you would see Wolverhampton, you'd see Stoke-on-Trent, you'd see Leicester, Manchester, Newcastle, and so on, every big city. You then overlay that with a map of where the biggest cuts have been made in direct grant or grant funding of any sort to local authorities, and it would fit exactly over the areas of greatest poverty. What they've done under the cloak of austerity is actually take away vast resources from the most needy, most deprived and poorest areas of this country, causing the greatest social stress and greatest hardship, while making the least cuts, in some cases even increasing expenditure in many of the wealthier parts of this country. That is the Tories at work. Ahead of us on all of these issues. I was in a primary school in my constituency 3 months ago, and we were doing a school assembly, and at the end of it, this was a very bright group of kids. One of them said, "What's your first priority for a Labour government in 2020? And I thought for a moment, and I said, well, actually, the first priority of a society has to be that the whole of its population is decently housed in a secure, damp-free, dry property that they can remain in. All of them cheered because so many of them were living in short stay, 6-month tenancies in the private rented sector. Many of them were living in very overcrowded council accommodation. I'm not blaming my local authority for that. They're doing their very best in exactly the same way that Wolverhampton's doing its very best to build more houses to try to get around it. But there has to be a national objective that we do tackle the problem of housing supply, we tackle the problem of shortage, we tackle the problem of insecurity, and we just say to ourselves, is it right, proper, necessary, correct or just in the 21st century in a civilised society to have people sleeping on the streets of our major cities. It is not necessary, not right, it's absolutely wrong. But the housing bill that's been put forward does not address any one of those issues. It takes away permanent tenancies, it increases rent in the council sector, it forces local authorities in some places to sell things off, and when we put forward an amendment to the housing bill, very simple one-line amendment saying any home rented out on the private rented market should be fit for human habitation. Not a very big ask. They voted that down. That is where the Tories are coming from. And so there are good landlords in the private sector, there are bad landlords in the private sector. There is an absolute case for proper regulation of the private sector to give permanent tenancies and payable and affordable rents, not the sky-high rents that are part of the social cleansing of some of the major cities of this country. So I see housing as an absolute and very important priority of what we intend to do. Adopted a policy of austerity ever since the banking crisis of 2008-2009. And if we made mistakes in the last Parliament, and we did, one of them was that we ended up apologising for the banking crisis of 2008-9 and all that followed from it. It was not nurses, school meals workers, home helps, street sweepers, those working in call centres, factories, or anywhere else that caused the banking crisis of 2008-9. It was the utter greed and irresponsibility of an out-of-control, unregulated, global banking market that austerity as a political choice, not an economic necessity, and we've seen the results of that over the past 6 years. One thing I pay tribute to George Osborne for is the 5-year plan. I think it's brilliant, absolutely imaginary beyond belief. Real imagination, he shows. There's a 5-year plan that in 5 years' time, the deficit will be paid down, the debt will be paid down, economic growth will return, public expenditure will at least maintain, if not grow. It's a fantastic plan. The only slight difficulty with it is, at whatever date you are, it is 5 years away. It's always another 5 years down the line. So we found in 2015, 2016, 2017, now it's 21, 22, and so on. Well, I tell you this, he won't be responsible for it in 20 or 21 or 22. We'll have something very, very different.